It's time for the whole 9 yards. Hello again, everyone. I'm Ralph Ventre. We are 3/4 of the way through the FCS season. 3 weeks to go. 6 teams will take to the gridiron in Week 10. We'll talk about those 3 important conference matchups in our opening drive. I'll start in Fairfield, Connecticut. The Pioneers are home for the 2nd week in a row, and they control their own destiny in terms of the NEC title race. Halfway through the conference schedule, Sacred Heart is the league's lone unbeaten at 3-0.
Obviously, we have 3 to play, which we're looking at this week only in Robert Morris, and we're going to be home. So we're hoping to have another big turnout and a lot of support, and the kids feed off that. And I think it's important to them, and it's important to the school and the community that we continue to appreciate our fans and hopefully get another win this weekend.
Mark Nofri's Pioneers lead the Northeast Conference in pass defense, limiting opponents to only 6 yards per pass attempt. Now, since conference play began, Sacred Heart has developed into an offensive juggernaut of sorts. The Pioneers have averaged more than 500 yards per NEC game thus far this season. Most recently, they rolled up 579 yards of offense in a 49-26 victory over Bryant. I'll have more on that record offensive performance by Sacred Heart later on in the show. For now, let's take a quick look at Robert Morris. The Colonials are still looking for their first Northeast Conference win under first-year head coach Bernard Clark Jr. They'll face a tall order in trying to slow down Sacred Heart's attack, but they're coming off a solid defensive performance against St. Francis in Week 9. The Colonials limited the Red Flash to just 2.8 yards per rush last week. They'll look to continue some of that success against the Sacred Heart team that ran wild in Week 9. As for the Robert Morris offense, the Colonials cooled off a bit against St. Francis, managing to find the end zone only once in that 20-7 setback. Previously, however, Robert Morris had been one of the league's top scoring teams, averaging 35 points per game over its first 3 conference contests. Sacred Heart, Robert Morris, live from Fairfield in Week 10. You can watch it live on NEC Front Row. Let's move out to Loretto, Pennsylvania, where St. Francis is looking for back-to-back wins for the first time this season. The Red Flash are coming off a great defensive effort in the win over Robert Morris, limiting their opponent to just 217 yards of offense. Overall, St. Francis is number 1 amongst NEC leaders in total defense. The Flash hold opponents to under 300 yards per game on average. They are stout against the run, allowing only 3.1 yards per carry to opposing ball carriers. As for SFU's impressive defensive numbers across the board, Bryant head coach James Perry is well aware of that success.
This is a team that is full throttle all the time. Probably the most aggressive defense we'll play all year. Just extraordinarily passionate. The amount of blitzes, the amount of fronts is off the charts. You know, they have an amazing amount of sacks, like just mind-boggling.
Another stat that may pique Perry's interest is opponents' completion percentage against St. Francis. NEC teams are completing only 45.7% of pass attempts against SFU. We'll see how that translates against Bryant's pass offense, led by quarterback Bryce Wilson. Wilson, who nearly set the NEC's single-season passing record last year, is the first NEC quarterback to throw for over 2,000 yards this season. He's connected on a league-leading 18 touchdown passes this season, and he's exceeded the 350-yard mark in 3 of Bryant's last 4 victories. This week, he'll look to air it out in Loretto, and you can watch on NEC Front Row, St. Francis hosting Bryant, Pat Fireball on the call. Now for the NEC featured game of the week on ESPN3. West meets East as Duquesne travels from the Steel City to Staten Island, New York to take on the Wagner Seahawks. It'll be senior day for Wagner, and one member of that senior class just happens to lead the FCS in rush yards. Ryan Folse still holding strong in the number 1 spot with 1,209 yards to his credit. This week, he goes up against a Duquesne team that owns the number 1 rush defense in Northeast Conference play. In 3 conference games against the Dukes, opponents are averaging only 3.1 yards per carry and have yet to score a rushing touchdown. Now, while Wagner battled the defending champs on the road last week, Duquesne is coming off its bye week. Before the break, Duquesne junior running back A.J. Hines was heating up. The former Jerry Rice Award winner went for 256 scrimmage yards in his most recent outing. That followed a 218-yard effort in another NEC victory. 2 teams hungry for a victory, 2 elite ball carriers. You won't want to miss this one. Be sure to tune in to ESPN3 at noon Eastern Time. Paul Dottino, Kevin Gilbride, John Schmelk on the call. Duquesne at Wagner in the NEC Game of the Week. Let's check in on the NEC stock market. I'll tell you whose value is on the way up. Sheepshead Bay's Titus Leo made the short trip over to Verrazano to play his college football for the Wagner Seahawks, and he's been somewhat of a pleasant midseason surprise. Leo did not see any live action until the 6th game of the season when he went down to Big South member Campbell and registered 4 tackles. A week later, he registered a sack in his first career Northeast Conference contest, and then in week 9, he scored his first collegiate touchdown. Leo, with a pick 6 in last week's setback to CCSU, he also forced a fumble in that one. In 3 games thus far this season, Titus Leo has seen time at both receiver and outside linebacker. On the defensive side, he's averaging 5 tackles per game. He's physically gifted with a lot of raw ability. He's New York City's own Titus Leo, and his stock is on the way up. I'm calling the Twitter timeout, and this week we're pulling one off the tweet sheet from Sacred Heart's Matt Gardner. The Pioneers' offensive coordinator was pleased with his team's showing in the win over Bryant. I mean, how could he not be? And he had this to say afterwards, noting that doing the little things right and playing hard have been components of the Pioneers' success. Another thing that's helped the Pioneers along the way is the way that the team protects the football. Sacred Heart has committed only 1 turnover in its 3 NEC games. That's 4 fewer miscues than the next best team. So they're not turning the ball over. They're doing the little things right. They're playing hard, and they're 3-0. Blue 42, Omaha. It's time for the NEC Audible. This week's soundbite will give us some insight on Bryant senior linebacker Thomas Costigan. He's the reigning NEC Defensive Player of the Year, and he brings a lot to the table for that Bryant defense. Now, Costigan is not in the top 5 on the FCS National Leaderboard in sacks like he was last year, but that doesn't mean he hasn't been keeping opposing offensive coordinators up at night. Costigan has been plenty effective this year. He's the NEC's leading tackler, 81 tackles in 8 games, and his contributions can be felt in many ways, according to James Perry.
It's always fun when your best player, I think a guy will go on and play professionally, is your captain. And, it just makes my job so much easier. And the leadership that he shows in addition to, stellar performance is incredible. And his arms are so long, he can cover ground, his strides are so great. And then when you complement all that physical gifts with this high intensity level, it's fun. It's fun to watch. And, I expect him to keep getting better.
That's amazing, bro. What has me in a state of amazement this week? Well, just take a look at the individual performances by CCSU's Aaron Dawson and Sacred Heart's Jordan Meacham in Week 9. Now, to put them in perspective, you have to realize that in the first 22 years of Northeast Conference football, only twice had an individual rushed for at least 300 yards in an NEC game. Now, fast forward to the NEC's 23rd season of football, specifically October 27th, 2018. 2 men accomplished that rare feat on the same day in the same state. Sacred Heart's Jordan Meacham carried 23 times for 318 yards and 3 touchdowns in Sacred Heart's win over Bryant. He averaged more than 13 yards per carry, only to be outdone by Central Connecticut sophomore Aaron Dawson. Dawson totaled an NEC single-game record 361 rush yards on 24 carries, breaking former Blue Devil Justice Hairston's record, which stood for nearly 12 seasons. In addition to being the best in Northeast Conference history, Dawson also wrote his name into the NCAA Division I record book. He ran for 308 yards in the second half of the 49-24 victory. That's the highest one-half rushing total amongst all Division I players in NCAA history. Kicking it back over to Sacred Heart, one more note on that performance. Meacham's 318 yards helped the Pioneers set the NEC team single-game rushing record.
Jordan's one of our playmakers. He's one of the better kids on the team, and each week Coach Gardner tries to find him ways to get the ball. He's very versatile. You can catch the ball in the backfield. You can flex him and put him in the slot. You can move him outside. He's just a great kid, and I couldn't be happier for the success that he's had this year.
The Pioneers ran for more than 500 yards in the victory, surpassing a 15-year-old record set by former NEC member Albany back in 2003. Now, to sum it all up, Aaron Dawson and Jordan Meacham accounted for 2 of the top 4 single-game individual rushing performances in NEC history. They did it on the same day, only miles away. Now, that's amazing. So now that I've set the scene for you, go out and enjoy Week 10 of the NEC schedule. 3 conference contests. All of them kick off at noon Eastern Time. You can watch 2 of them on NEC Front Row. And then, of course, there's the featured game of the week between Duquesne and Wagner live on ESPN3. For NEC Front Row, I'm Ralph Ventre. Thank you for watching the whole 9 yards. We'll do it again next week.